So I thought we'd just have a conversation this morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Sue Zazon. And I was asked to talk about leadership. And the best way I know how to do that is to share some life experiences. So the title of my conversation was going to be, or is, Authentic Leadership. You will notice that that word is probably not used through the entire time that I'm sharing stories, but hopefully at the end, and my goal is that you'll have a glimpse and you'll feel like you know me. And to me, that's what it's about, is feeling like you really know someone, how they're put together, what their values are, and therefore you kind of understand how they would lead their family, an organization, the community. So that's my goal this morning. So I thought I'd share some stories because I'm lots of things besides the Central Ohio president for Huntington. I have many different titles and roles that I play, whether it's a wife, daughter. I actually was a waitress for years. I'm going to share a story about my waitressing experience that actually relates to my job today. I'm a cancer survivor. I am a person of faith. I am a follower sometimes. I'm not always a leader. But all those things in a big package are me. And what I'm going to talk about are nuggets I have learned throughout my entire lifetime that make me me. And hopefully they'll make a difference to you and you'll kind of be able to get a glimpse into what I feel like is a really, really important part of leadership, which is really just being who you are and bringing your whole self every day to work, whatever that may mean. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is doing small things really well, and they can have big outcomes. This is my waitressing story. I was a waitress for like 10 years, so lots of stories there. The second thing is using every single one of your experiences in life to apply no matter what you're doing. And the last one is, we'll end it on a funny note. I'll share lots of things that I laugh at myself about, but I have lots of good stories where I talk about just not taking yourself quite so seriously, because you've got to enjoy what you do. And if you can laugh at yourself, usually that's the best person to laugh at, because other people don't like to be laughed at, right? So I have a lot of those, and so I'll share those. So I'm going to talk about doing the small things well, and if you make a mistake, owning it. So how many of you have made a mistake in the last month? How about in the last day? Yes. How about the last hour? Tony, the last minute? Do you want to share in the last minute what you've done that's a mistake? I'm joking. So I want to share a story from high school. So take you all the way back in time. It's 1980, and I'm 16 years old. So do the math. I'm 54, soon to be 55. And I work at Dutch Pantry. If any of you remember Dutch Pantry, I was on the 71 and Stringtown Road exit in Grove City. I grew up in Grove City. And we wore these blue little outfits, and we had bonnets and white shoes. It was a very traditional waitressing outfit. And I worked second shift. So I worked from 2 or 3 in the afternoon till 10. And at that time in life, the best place to be, especially during the summer, was Pizza Hut on Hoover Road at night, once it got dark, and it didn't get dark till late. So I had about an hour between 10 and 11 when I could actually do what was fun, what teenagers considered fun. And so my whole goal was to make as much money as I can on tips, get out of work, go to the Pizza Hut for an hour, change in my car out of my blue smock and everything. And my curfew was 11 on a weekday and 11:30 on the weekend. So I was a great waitress. I loved to waitress. I loved to meet people and did a really, really good job. But the whole goal at Dutch Pantry was to figure out how to earn your way to first shift, because everybody came in for breakfast. And you worked the 5:30 to 2 shift, and you'd probably make about $50 in tips. On the second shift, you'd probably make 30, right? So you kind of had to earn your stripes. And our manager, her name was Lydia. She was about 60 years old and a wonderful, wonderful woman. Her kids and her family used to come in and sit on the coffee counter up front. So everybody in the whole place knew her. And she kind of ran what shift you worked, when you worked, and so forth. So I'd been there about a year, and it was really hard to get a first shift opening. And she knew I wanted to be on first shift. And I had told her, and a first shift opportunity came available. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get this job, right? Because I've told her, I've worked really hard, I know the customers like me, and guess what? I did not get it. So first of all, I blamed everybody else but myself, right? Because I'm like, how could they not choose me? I let her know. Really, I went into like sort of victim mentality, right? I was mad, I wanted to quit. And I remember I went home and my mom said, Susie, you need to get a grip and go in and talk to her and find out what the problem is. So I'm like, okay. So I go in and talk to Lydia, who at that time really felt like my grandmother. And she said to me, she said, Sue, you are such a good waitress. The customers love you. Everything really, really goes well. But at the end of your shift, you remember when you had to consolidate salt and pepper, if any of you have ever done that before, or you have to consolidate the ketchup, you clean the ice cream machine, and then you have to take the trash out to the back, all those things that you just hate doing, right? And I was trying to get to Pizza Hut because then I could have a social life. So I would skimp on my cleanup duties, right? And she said something I'll never forget. And she said, it's disrespectful to third shift when you don't clean up well and you don't ever want to leave a place like that. She goes, you're a great waitress, but that's why you didn't get first shift. And I was like, disrespectful? I mean, to me, that's like just a horrible word that I never associated with myself. And again, I went home and I'm like, Mom, I'm like, she called me disrespectful. Do you think I'm disrespectful? And she's like, well, look at your room, Sue. I was like, okay. So anyway, I regrouped again, and this is big drama in my life, and I went back in and I said, Lydia, I'm listening to you and I'm going to change. And over the next 3 or 4 months, I made such an effort, and I call it consolidating the ketchup. Does anybody still do that in their refrigerator? Like, I do. And I pour one in the other, and I just feel so good about it. And I could throw the one away. And I was determined, and I cleaned up really, really well. And my goal was for the other waitresses on the team to say, I want Sue on my shift with me. And I like to work after Sue's there because she leaves it in great shape. That was never how I looked at it before. It was about serving the customers and making sure I got a good tip, right? And making sure I cleaned up after that. But I did not have a lens into what it was like to follow and what it was like to be a good teammate as a waitress. And I think about the lesson I learned there. And fast forward, this is very ironic. I am Terry Cable, who was hiring for the First Merit president position, was the sister-in-law of another waitress on the Dutch Pantry first shift. I would have never met Krista Burton if I hadn't changed and figured it out, went back and got the first shift position. Krista gave Terry my name when they were looking for a president for First Merit, and because I listened and changed, and frankly, it's embarrassing that I was disrespectful to folks that were coming and working after me, but I figured it out, and Lydia was a part of my life. I met Krista, who told Terry about me, who called me for the First Merit president job 25 years later. So lots of times you can't connect dots like that, and I feel very blessed that I could, but it was all about doing the small things well and respecting my colleagues and my teammates and consolidating the ketchup. So my kids are so tired of me always saying, consolidate the ketchup. And I've tried to tell them the story and they don't quite get it yet. So hopefully all of you, when you look in your refrigerator now, will have a new meaning for consolidating the ketchup. But doing the small things right, not reacting, even though I felt like a victim, like what did I do wrong and I want to quit and so forth. My mom kind of righted my ship and said, go back in there and find out what to do, truly listening and becoming a teammate that people wanted to work with was one of the most valuable lessons I ever got. I didn't know it in the moment, but it paid dividends 25 years later. And one of the things that really matters to me is I hope everybody that I come in contact with every day, that there's some small difference that I can help make for them. And that's just important with a colleague as it is for the person leaving you the tip. And it's just a life lesson that I've taken with me. I also need to speak good English, right? My mom would be disappointed in that. Taken with me, and I wanted to share it because I think it has a lot of meaning. So the next part I want to share with you is using all your experiences in every aspect of your life. And a few of you know my background, and I've got a couple personal stories that really have impacted my life also, because it's part of who I am as a whole, but I've figured out a way to bring that whole person to work, and it's really made me a better leader and a better teammate. So my husband and I, we have 6 children. Mine, yours, ours, theirs, you name it, they all come in. My second marriage began with an immediate family, 4 kids in all, 2, 4, 6, and 8. And it was hard. I was a new mom, mostly myself. My first marriage obviously did not work out, and we got divorced when I had 1 and he had 3, and we came together. And I got divorced when Samantha was maybe 1, around 1. And it's not a fun part of life. We got remarried, and it was a steep learning curve, figuring out how to have a career. Be a blended family is hard. I don't know how many of you are in blended families or know friends that are. It is a responsibility like I never understood, because I felt like at the time, and I still feel this way in some ways, it was easier to raise my own daughter than it was my stepchildren. I don't even like that word, stepchildren, because I didn't have complete control. I had more control over Samantha than the other 3, and there's 6 parents involved, right? And you're trying to figure it all out. So my husband and I were smart enough to know that we needed some help. And we're like, okay, we've got to get some help doing this because there's so many things, and how do we manage this and make our blended family work? So we took classes, we went to counseling, and it was the #1 priority of our lives. So fast forward. I am interviewing for the president position at KeyBank. And there are 5 other candidates. They happen to be all male. And they happen to have a lot more experience than I did. And I was 34, 35, something like that. And I went to a full day of interviews in Cleveland. And this was the first time in my career where I felt like I was taking this huge leap, and I didn't have all the qualifications. I wasn't even sure how I got there. Someone said, I think you should interview for this. It wasn't that I felt like I was, I don't know, it was a big jump for me. So I go to Cleveland, and I'm having an interview with Bob Jones, if any of you remember Bob Jones. Now he is the CEO of a bank in Indiana. And he looked at my resume, and he said, Sue, we have interviews all day long with people interested in this position, and I have to say your resume does not have the experience to really run this entire region. You're going to have a complete commercial banking team, and then you're going to be responsible for the revenue of all these other lines of business that don't report to you. And I said, you know what, you're right. On paper, I've run the commercial banking team for 2 years. I had 6 direct reports. That was my only management experience. Other than that, I'd always been a direct producer. And I said, but I do have something that's not on my resume. I said, I have a blended family. And if you think about how a blended family is put together, you sort of have direct reports and you have a lot of dotted lines, right? So you have to learn to live by influence, by communicating, by alignment, by showing you care. And that's how, when you love, it's amazing what you can get accomplished with people. And sometimes it hurts really bad too. And I said, I am still learning, but the best leadership course I've ever taken in matrix management is becoming a blended family. And taking it so seriously that I've gone to classes, I've done some things wrong, I've done a lot of things well, but we're making it. And we're figuring this out. And I know I can run a matrix organization because of my experience. And that was a risk to me because I'm sharing, first of all, when you come into an interview, you don't want to tell somebody, okay, my first marriage didn't work, so now I'm in a blended family. Then I had to go counseling. I'm still working on it. I don't have it figured out. It felt, one of the funniest stories, tangent, I'll never forget, we were in counseling, I was with my husband, and we're talking through the blended family thing, and our counselor's name is Bob. And Bob says, you know, and I always felt like Mike was having more problems than I was having, right? And the counselor says, Sue, would you like to have some individual sessions? And my husband, I never forget, he went, yes! I was like, seriously? And because it's hard, it's really hard. And to do it in a way that's just, you get going, right? Somehow that resonated with Bob Jones, and he was the only one I shared that with when I went to those interviews, because I had 5 other interviews. I know that that made a difference, and I was very blessed again that that resonated with him, because it gave me my launching point for my career. So I've always been a great producer, consolidated my catch-ups, even in banking I do that, all those things, but I didn't have the leadership on paper that was really needed for this position, and it was a risk. The people that took a chance on me, it was a risk. And I believe somehow that connectivity of who I was, bringing all of me to work, sharing that, really prepared me for my first really big leadership opportunity. And I did get the job, and it really launched me into a whole nother level in my career. But that is, I remember saying those things and thinking, this is either going to be really good or really bad. And that was years ago, when it wasn't as common to really talk about those things. You kept it all to business and your accomplishments and your goals and so forth. It was really more about me as what kind of leader was I. So again, bringing your whole self to work is not always easy, and it's a risk. And then I have a recent example I want to share with you. And I know Beth, Beth, you were part of what I did most recently with my daughter. I don't think there was anybody else there. So my daughter is 22. This is number 5 of 6. And she was in an abusive relationship for about 4 years. And one of the things, again, I want to make a difference in so many different ways. And Huntington is an amazing organization because it allows me to be me. And the fact that I could host, we had about 50 women, and we talked about domestic violence. And my daughter and I both got up and shared our story. And I remember I talked to our CEO ahead of time, Steve Steiner, and I said, hey, I know this isn't real conventional, but I'm going to share this story, and I think it represents Huntington in an amazing way. Because if we're sharing our story, think about the colleagues of the people in this room. 1 in 3 women are affected by domestic abuse. 1 in 4 men. And there's colleagues at Huntington sitting around us that may think, oh, that happens over there. No, it happened in our home. There are people sitting at this breakfast, and the numbers are true. And it's a really, really stark reality that needs to be talked about. So you think about making a difference. I felt very vulnerable. I was much more comfortable talking about it as a mom than, I mean, as my perspective. But when my daughter got up and spoke about it, I thought I was just going to like, because she shared a lot. It was very open, but it was impactful. And one of my beliefs is that change happens one conversation at a time. You can do a lot of big things in life, but I'm a firm believer that, you know, you think about the rock that ripples, right? And how you treat someone, and sometimes you make mistakes, right? And going back and fixing those. Or having that conversation that said, hey, this happened in my family, and it stunk. We're working through it. There's a lot of things that happen that all of a sudden it opens up a door that maybe someone else will get help, right? And I am so honored to have my leadership position at Huntington that allows me to share things that can change people's lives. And yes, we make loans, we take in deposits, we do a lot of wonderful things. That's what we do for a living in order to have the leadership opportunities we have in the community. That's really why we're all here. So being able to talk about something that is not something that's spoken a lot about is another way to take your whole self to work and figure out how to make a difference, even if it changed one person's life. And I will share the story that I shared at this breakfast. I'm a part of a small leadership group at Huntington, and I lead it, and it's a small group of women. There are about 8 of us. And I started out the meeting with, give me your highest high and your lowest low since the last time we all sat down together. And I said, I'll start because they looked at me like, what am I going to say, right? And like I'm so scary. And I said, so I'll start. I gave my professional high and low, and my personal high and low was Michaela, my daughter, was coming home from college. And that was a high. I was going to get to, she left when she was 18 because we needed to get her away to be safe. And she was coming home. She hasn't finished college yet, but I said, my biggest low is she's coming home, and I'm scared. And I said, she was in an abusive relationship. It's the first time I really talked about it in a way that I mentioned it, but I was starting to feel ready, right? And a young lady in this group said, I can't believe you said that. She said, I need help. And I was like, wow. And I didn't realize how that one little opening of saying, hey, this happened in our family, caused an opening in her mind. Interestingly enough, there were more women in that group that had been affected. This one just happened to be in the middle of it. And I thought, oh my gosh, someone's life. I mean, this is a magnitude. This is like a mountain compared to a ripple, right? Is going to be changed. So fast forward, many, many months later, she's relocated. Huntington relocated her. We hooked her up with human resources. She got some help. And that's a miracle. And if you think about that, that's a miracle. And I know that we do loans and deposits, but that's really what we do every day at the bank and in the community and what I want to do with my life. So that's another story. It just happens when you're bringing all of you and all your experiences, and it takes time and energy, and it's sometimes scary to be vulnerable, but it plays big dividends. It really does in people's lives. So that was my second point. Bring your whole self to work. And the last one is laugh often. And I do laugh a lot. I have a big, loud laugh, and people can hear me coming. Sometimes that's good, sometimes not so good. So this is my story about myself laughing at myself at work. I had a phenomenal year, and I was asked to a recognition lunch, and there were probably 15 people around this big table. And we all were going around the room talking about why our years were so great, right? And so they get to me, and this is what I meant to say. This is not what came out, but this is what I meant to say. You guys can fill in this blank, okay? I meant to say, hang on. We have had a lot of success this year, but what came out was, we have had a lot of blank this year. True story. So I stopped. Like, that's why we're, that's not a good answer to why the group is performing so well. And so I was like, I turned beet red. And I sat there and I was like, oh gosh, how do I recover from this? And I said, okay, I'm going to regroup. And I said, so if anybody wonders if I can recover from a really embarrassing, awkward situation, you'll know I can after this. And then I said, and I spoke much slower, and I said, we've had a lot of success this year because, and I went on and told the story and acknowledged all my teammates and so forth. But there are so many things that you just got to learn to laugh at yourself. What do you do? And I actually thought it was one of the more funny things I've ever done. And I have many stories like that I could fill an entire hour with, where honestly it's been so much fun to have that attitude and be able to enjoy myself. And again, I could share a lot of stories, but it's really important to find humor every day in your life. I know one of the things that I try and do every day, I'm going to make you guys do it with me, and then we'll just open up for questions for a second, is I really try and listen to my my heart and my mind and my body. And so everybody put your hand right here. What is that? I'm looking at you, Tony. He answered, it's my heart, yes. So I try and pay attention, you feel the dub. And that's really what the purpose in life is living from inside of yourself. And finding a way through whatever you do, whatever your role is. I am so blessed to have a platform and be able to speak on behalf of Huntington, on behalf of myself, and that it's okay to be me. It's okay to be who I am and share what really brings me to work every day because it aligns with Huntington's values. That has to happen. For me to work someplace, that has to happen. And I have to be able to speak from the heart. This is why I come to work every day. This is why I love being a leader. And I'm still learning every single day. I still make mistakes. Sometimes I don't consolidate the ketchup well. And my dribbles coming down the side. But I try and recognize it and do something about it. And so when I was asked to speak and I chose authentic leadership, again, I didn't use authentic, that word, one time, but I want all of you to walk away and hopefully you feel like you know me a little bit better and you know how I'm put together. To me, that's authentic. Authentic, I think, is almost overused now, but letting people in, feeling your heart, leading very smartly with your mind, making sure you're making great choices, but really having that holistic lens about how to make a difference in people's lives is really important. So with that, I hope that helped you understand kind of how I'm put together. Hopefully you feel like you know me a little bit better, and I think that's it. So I hope you enjoy your day. And I always try and end with a quote, and I have a good one. And I wish I could have come up with this, but I truly believe this. The more human you are, that is when you become superhuman.
Nice.
So you think about always having to put on the masks of perfection, or all these different masks we wear, and just recognizing we're all human, figuring it out together. I think that's when you take on exponential powers and become superhuman. So thank you for having me. Okay.
Questions? Ben, question?
Yeah.
Willie.
Well, first I want to compliment you on being so open and honest and recognizing that it's important to bring the whole self to work. Often we hear conversations from leaders who don't desire to say, I also am a follower, so kudos to you. But with that in mind, my question is, how do you get buy-in within your team to be their authentic self, to bring the personal to work as well, without it being a distraction?
Well, I do think it's important that you choose the right times, and you have to know when to do that and when not to. So some of that just, and I misstepped a few times along the way. And again, I'll be open. So I asked for an executive coach when I joined Huntington, and I always think that there's ways to improve, to figure out how to be more effective, and so forth. And one of your biggest strengths is usually one of your biggest weaknesses. So you get all this 360 leadership review and so forth. Everybody resoundingly said, "Oh my gosh, we feel like we can approach her. She's authentic, whatever word you want to use, genuine and so forth. But sometimes we feel like she needs to be more presidential, right? So your biggest strength, being approachable and having a presence and so forth. But yet, when do I choose the moments to be that president that people need to make certain decisions and so forth, and communicating that more effectively in my style, but always being true to myself? So the answer is, I'm figuring it out. And I got to, I think I'm getting better at it. But you sense when you can make a difference. And people do need to have sometimes different types of leadership depending on the situation. And part of my growth is figuring out how to do that well, and be decisive. And I really try and be a good listener. I'm not always the best at it, but sometimes it's a matter of, no, we're doing it this way, you're gonna have to trust me, and we're going down this path, and here we go. And I've gotten much better at figuring that out over the last 5 years. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And I don't know, so there's people from my team here, and maybe you guys can answer, say, you know, what have I what have I done that's irritated you?
Here's your chance.
No one wants to answer, yes.
I would just echo what you said. I think so Sue joined Huntington 2 years ago.
Yep.
Our longtime regional president, Jim Kunk, retired after 25 years, 40 years. I don't remember. It was a
35.
long time.
Long time, he was a
So,
great
yeah.
advocate of mine, wonderful man.
So Sue coming in the leadership position, we were very excited. I think I've seen, and right away we could tell you were a different type of leader than Jim. But we love the parts of Jim and we love the
Yeah.
parts of you because you can be very vulnerable and laugh at yourself, get us laughing, and we see what a great connector you are with clients because they see that too. But then we see you be very presidential when you need to, so I think you're figuring it out just fine.
I'm figuring it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sue, first of all, thank you for your transparency. It's absolutely refreshing, very, very refreshing. I appreciate that very, very much.
You're welcome.
It's just refreshing. So the question is, because that's beautiful, but are you wired that way? You know, some of us are wired that way, or how much of that did you have to learn how much you're wired that way? Either way, it's just a good thing.
So I think I'm naturally wired that way a little bit, but I've also learned that by being that way, I've gotten the best results. So you kind of gravitate to what, and they've been not only just connectivity results, team results, relationship results, but I've had phenomenal financial results. And I don't want to downplay the importance of that, and the importance of making sure you meet, exceed, and figure out how to do that. My way of getting there is not the norm, and especially in the banking industry. And I think that has been a strength and allowed me to be actually more successful, both financially and more importantly, making a difference in people's lives. And in a way, I think I stumbled upon it naturally, but I definitely, just like, you know, I talked about, you know, a blended family, asking for an executive coach. I always am hungry for feedback, improvement. Sometimes it feels really crappy sometimes, because you read 12 really good things and you get one bad thing, and what do we focus on? I'll lay there in bed at night and I'll think about the one horrible thing, right? Like, oh my gosh. And I've had to learn to be tougher, and really embrace stuff that I don't like. And I've also have to learn to do things that don't come natural to me. And I work at it. The financial stuff, I'm very grateful that it's come along, but what I've really, really worked at is those skills, and just making better. So I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah.
I'm curious about your observations and experiences when it comes to gender. And I don't believe that transparency, openness, vulnerability is dependent on gender.
Right.
But I'm curious to how maybe men in your work culture respond to your
Tony.
You understand where I'm going with this? I mean, does the transparency and
Yeah.
the vulnerability resonate well with, you know, most of the males in your culture? And, you know, talk to me about that.
So I think to some I'm probably an acquired taste. And I probably, you know, this is what I would say. When you truly care about people, you can get through a lot of different things. I think initially there is some uncomfortableness with certain people, whether it's male or female, I would say probably more on the male side, just because of the way we're all, society we live in, and so forth. And I have to be very true and just keep caring. I care about them being successful. I care about trying to help their teams be successful. So I have to figure out what matters to them, and then I try and focus on that, as opposed to what I view as a successful relationship. And that can be hard, because if somebody only values numbers, I take a step back, and I'm learning how to do this better, and say, my goal is to make sure they have a better number, and somehow I made a difference to them to get a better number, without being overt and saying, you know, whatever. Some people need different things, right? And so if you really focus on what they are looking for versus what I want to give, I can still give it in my way, but I have to do it on their terms, and I will get somewhere. But it takes longer, and it takes being a little bit tougher, because you're not liked all the time. And I don't care what anybody says, I like to be liked, you know, it matters to me. And, but eventually, if your behavior is consistent, and you're doing things for the right reasons, whether or not you mesh really well, as, you don't be friends with everybody, but you'll figure it out. And there will be a respectful, long-term relationship. I've had to work on that, because most of my life that comes natural to me. I immediately gravitate, and I can figure out, and I'm a hugger, right? So this whole Me Too movement, this has been interesting. And like, do I stand like this now and not hug people? It doesn't come natural to me. I'm like, hey, and I can't really change who I am, but I don't want to make people uncomfortable, right? And I guarantee you I've made people uncomfortable if I've hugged them, just because I'm excited to see them or whatever it is. Not in a bad way, but I'm not going to change who I am. And we have to be able to be true to ourselves. And if I was just standing there like this, would you guys think I was off kilter? I mean, if I just like started shaking everybody's hand, and you'd be like, there's something wrong with her. This isn't the Sue that we know. And so I think you got to figure it out. But Tony, maybe you can give some. And I mean, you're a
I've
male.
mastered kind of the butt out hug now. So.
Yes. Sideways hug.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would just add, I mean, you treat everybody with love and respect, right? And the numbers are the numbers, so everyone works really hard at Huntington to get the job done. But that's just kind of basic qualifications to get the job, right? So it's how you treat people and the respect that you show and give that makes a difference.
It does make a difference. But it's harder with some than others. It just is. And figuring that out is not always, it doesn't always feel good. But if you focus on them and not you, it works wonders. Yeah.
Have you found yourself in a situation where you're being your authentic self, yet you just don't seem to connect with those who surround you, whether it's at work or boards or associations, and how do you handle that?
Can you repeat that question?
She said, have you ever found yourself being yourself and it just not working, and the relationship or whatever situation you're in does not go well? Yes, I have. And I take those situations, and I'm learning again, this is my evolution of leadership. I can't take those situations personally. And I think, especially when you're being very open, it's really hard not to take things personally. I'm talking about myself. So in my viewpoint, taking things less personally, because most of the time how I'm feeling, I remember, I go back to my counseling days. This is a great quote from Bob the counselor. And he said, Sue, you let things that you cannot control rent too much space in your brain. Okay? And I'll never forget that quote. And he said, what do you want to rent space in your brain? You want things that are productive. Even if you don't like them, if they're productive or you're making a difference or whatever, categorize the things that you can control. Have those rent the most space in your brain. if I cannot control how everybody perceives me or how I can't control what I do. And part of my responsibility as a leader at Huntington and to myself is to adapt and figure out how to be effective in different situations. But part of my responsibility to myself and loving myself is not changing who I am. So I'm not always going to be liked. And that revelation, I go back to my stepchildren. I remember Catherine literally said to me once, I don't have to listen to you, you're not my mom, and I don't think I love you. Well, there's people that report in that if they were really being honest, they'd probably say that to me in different words. You're not my boss, and you're trying to get me to do something, and I don't want to do it, and I don't like you. That would be the version of the work version. And so if I took it personally, that would just make me feel awful. Now, in my younger years, I think I took a lot of things too personally. And I think you have to process them personally because it has a place in your heart and how you lead, and you can make changes that way. But you just gotta be tough. You gotta be tough. And if you're out there for a goal and you know what's right, it really doesn't matter. And if you feel good about what you did, if you made a mistake, own it. But just be more personally tough. And I'm always still learning that too, because I don't think I was born that way, but I'm getting so much better at it.
Well, I know you need to leave a little early
I
to
do.
go in town for us.
Yes,
You
I
out
do.
of there, so please thank. We appreciate you really, I mean, really showing your authentic self. I think that that's awesome. That, not many leaders can do, so.
I'll try.